Let me once again officially welcome everyone to today's webinar, School Reform in Detroit, Critical Lessons in Building Community Support. This webinar is part of the Power of Social Innovation series, and it's sponsored by the Government Innovators Network and the Malcolm Weiner Center for Social Policy here at the Harvard Kennedy School. Today's moderator is Archon Fung, who is the Ford Foundation Professor of Democracy and Citizenship at the Harvard Kennedy School. Professor Fung.
Hi, welcome everyone to this discussion of community engagement and school reform in Detroit. It's an extremely important topic, not least, but well, everybody in every major city across the country is thinking about school reform. And sometimes, as we saw in Washington recently, when school reform is driven largely by people thinking about the building and the system, it imposes sometimes long-term or short-term costs on people in the community. There's a lot of pain to be taken, and sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the problem of mobilizing parents and communities to support school reform. And so we're looking today at an experience in Detroit, and we welcome people with experiences from other places as well into this conversation. But today's focus is on community mobilization and engagement and professional school reform efforts working together. And we have a couple of great people here to talk about that issue and share their experiences. The first person is Michael Tenbush, and you should see his bio now. He's the Vice President for Educational Preparedness from the United Way of Southeastern Michigan, and has a long history in school reform and community engagement efforts. As you can see, Mike led a regional effort to produce kindergarten and high school improvements in many countries across southeastern Michigan. He's done a lot in early childhood work and has now moved to the high school level and is working on the community side of this problem by engaging the United Way. The second speaker is Jonathan Matthews, who is currently and has been since 2008 the principal of the Cody High School Complex, where he leads the Small Schools Redesign Initiative and is principal of one unit within that complex as well, which is the Academy of Public Leadership High School. He's had a long history of a long and successful career in public education. He was the assistant principal at Mumford High School, and Jonathan is a native of Detroit. He's worked, lived, and grown up in Detroit, and so comes from the community that he's now one of the educational leaders of. And so the format for this discussion is that Michael will talk for about seven minutes or so, and then Jonathan will talk, or they have 14 minutes total, and they can distribute it how they like, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. And as you're listening to Michael and Jonathan talk, feel free to type in your questions in the question tool, and then we'll be able to see those, and then as we move into the question and answer period, we'll engage with the questions that have been accumulating as the session goes on. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Michael Tenbush.
Great. Thank you. And this is Mike, and I titled my remarks, "What do you do when things appear hopeless?" And so for those of you out there who think you have really difficult schools and educational challenges, this first slide here is designed to inspire you and say, well, at least we're not that hopeless. So these are the fourth grade NAEP scores, National Assessment for Education Progress. 2 years ago was Detroit's first time taking that test, and we scored lower than any school district in the history of school districts taking the NAEP, with only 3% of our kids, this is just a fourth grade snapshot, proficient at the NAEP level. And the next slide, again, this is in the hopeless category, just shows you real quickly. Those are third grade reading and math scores on the left. The two, maybe let's see if I can use this pointer. So you've got, roughly 75% of your kids doing well, apparently, in the third grade. By the 8th grade, that's down to about 50%, but you're still thinking as a parent or teacher, hey, we're not doing too bad. Half our kids are doing on track for success. But somehow, magically, 3 years later, you find that only either 11% or 2% of your kids are college-ready in reading and math, which is just an obvious travesty. You know, it really calls into doubt the effectiveness or the cut scores that we're using to define success on Michigan's assessment test over on the left. But you can't help but kind of emerge from looking at slides like this and living in the neighborhoods and the schools producing these results and feeling like things are hopeless. And so I think the innovation that we've been successful at in many ways over the last 3 years is creating a sense of hope where things do seem so hopeless. So I have 4, I guess, principles I'd like to share with you on how to create that hope. And the first is to have a clear theory of change with a very simple plan. We can let complex problems lead to complex solutions all the time, and I don't think we get very far with that. And so I think the first thing that we did really well was have a clear theory of change with a simple plan. We didn't come up with this. We stole it, adopted it from Mass Insight out of Boston. And the circle here goes to there's got to be community will, from the governor to the regional chamber to your churches to your schools, have to believe in your goal. And in this case, our goal is graduation rates over 80%, where historically the graduation rates are far south of 60%. And we say there are 3 ways to get there. And again, this is Mass Insight's work, not our own. But you got to change conditions, which we call you have to have strong site-based management, great leaders with control over their resources, people, programs in their building. Secondly, you have to build capacity. And for us, this means you have to have a turnaround partner. We have not historically had high-performing high schools and high-poverty communities in Michigan. So we said we're only going to fund schools that partner with a turnaround partner who's built these high-performing high schools and high-poverty communities. They don't exist in Michigan. We'll bring the best ones to Detroit. You find the partnership. You get the right principal with the autonomy to make the decisions, and we'll pay for that partnership. And then finally, we said we'll do this work in clusters. So it's not 1 school here or 2 schools this year. There are 30 high schools in southeastern Michigan with dropout rates or graduation rates less than 60%. We invited all 30 high schools to apply to this turnaround challenge, and 11 did, and 5 were funded in the first year. So that was our first cluster of schools. 2 of those schools in Detroit actually went to a series of small schools, and Jonathan's the principal of one of them. So we now actually have 10 schools in southeastern Michigan and the first network of turnaround schools. But so I just wanted to tell you real quick, you can get complex so quickly that you lose everybody. You really got to stay simple. But the second piece was, for us, you've got to have a vision. So when we started this work, we had a turnaround conference with about 50 teachers in the room, and I asked, how many of you believe if you made bold and dramatic changes, you could get to graduation rates of 80% or higher? Less than 5 people raised their hand, or maybe 5. I asked it again, and maybe 6 people raised their hand. I asked those 6, why do you believe you can have graduation rates 80% or higher? And they said, because the Skillman Foundation flew us around the country. We went to New York, we went to Chicago. We saw same kids, same teachers, just like us, but they're actually doing the work. There's no reason why we can't. So we realized we have to send more people to New York and Chicago, which Skillman funded, and we did. And then we had to bring more people from Chicago and New York here to create this vision that you can do this. So you really have to get people to actually see and touch the vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Our kids were perishing at alarming rates just for lack of vision. And so the third piece, I would say, it goes to beliefs. In Detroit, I think we had 2 fundamental beliefs 4 years ago. You can't fix the schools until you fix poverty. And if you do want to fix the schools, you just need to close them all down and start over. I mean, I think everybody just kind of looked at New Orleans nostalgically and wished that we could have a flood and start a new district, right? And so we were very purposeful over 3 years to say just about every time we were out talking, and we have the benefit at United Way of speaking to corporations and civic groups, and our job is to be out in the community talking. And we would say 2 things every time. No child should go to a high school with less than a 60% chance of graduation. There are 30 high schools where that's the accepted norm, and it's unacceptable. No child should go to a high school with less than 60% chance of graduation. And the other belief we said is, this is happening all over the country. There's no reason why we can't do it in Michigan, no reason why we can't do it in Detroit. And so we really kind of called the question. The belief was here. If others can do it, we can do it. And certainly we owe it to our kids. And then the final piece I wanted to say is, once you put those three things in place, you just have to work your plan until you're successful. And I'll try and close up in like a minute and a half here. One slide because here's the thing, just real quickly. Every foundation we went to, every corporation we went to said, Mike, we love what you do, great plan, but it's never going to work. And literally, everybody and their brother, outside of AT&T, Skillman, and United Way, and Ford Foundation, for 3 years told us no. So we waited until we got first-year results. We were very clear about what our on-track graduation rates look like. And in just 1 year, what you're looking here at, this red line, is the percentage of kids at Jonathan Matthews School and 7 other of these small schools in Detroit that from 2005 to 2008, the number of kids who missed 20 or more days of school and therefore were chronically absent had risen to 86%. If I could hear things out there, I think that'd be the sound of jaws dropping, because how can you have high schools where 86% of your kids miss 20 or more days of school? Couple with that with whether they're missing 2 or more classes, and you have a projected graduation rate of 86%, failure rate of 86%. We had a year of planning in 2008 and 9, first year of execution with all of the challenges and bumps you can imagine. Jonathan and his peers, his leaders, his teachers, reduced that graduation rate by a quarter, reduced that absentee rate by a quarter to 63%. It's still too high, but when you couple it with the actual number of kids who are passing their courses, which is almost all of them, you see projected graduation rates of 80% or higher across every one of our 10 schools. And the phenomenal thing for us here is that this arc probably goes back 30 or 40 years, and rarely in my life have I ever seen in 1 year across 10 different schools such a dramatic improvement. We shared this with the president of GM North America in September, the day after we got it. He said, what will it take to do more of those? And GM just made a $27 million investment over the next 5 years to double this impact in schools and in early childhood. So I'll just do one quick slide before I turn it over to Jonathan. Our whole theory of change rests on great individuals like Jonathan and his peers, finding them, putting them in networks so that they're working together with the same beliefs, same plans, same values. And when that happens, there's this discipline of practice. Every principal has control over people programs in their building. Every teacher knows the 20 kids he or she will get from freshman orientation in high school to freshman orientation in college. And once that happens, you start to have systems of influence that leads to broad-based social change. But you have to work it up like that. You just can't come in and create broad-based social change. That's the way we think about it. Now I want to turn it over to Jonathan to give you the story of what it's like to be one of those individuals who's been in that funnel for 3 years.
Good afternoon. What does this look like? When you look at implementing a massive change to the degree that we have, there's some basic questions when we look at what it looks like. The first question is, what is the physical design? For the Cody complex and also for the Osborne complex, we chose to do the small schools design where each school is autonomous. They are separate schools within the same building. This is a model that was based out of New York, and it comes from our intermediary Institute for Student Achievement. With that, it did require us to find leaders for each of the small schools that are autonomous. So if you were to have a visualization of what it looks like at the Cody complex, you went from having approximately 1,000 young people, one principal, and maybe 2 to 3 assistant principals to govern that population, and you've changed it to a small school design that ultimately will end up being 4 separate small schools with no more than 400 to 450 students per small school, with an individual principal for each of those schools. And within each school, there's a different curriculum in some cases, different schedule. So that means that they're not in the halls at the same time, not using the same resources, separate budgets, but they utilize the same campus. Visually, it's difficult to understand until you really see it, but it's an amazing concept because it does differ from some other designs that are out there. There are some that are within our network that go to just ninth grade academies, or sometimes where they do it at grade level. Some do career academies. But for ours in particular, we chose this model because it does create we wanted to have a definitive understanding of what it means to be autonomous and small within a larger organization, and it's been extremely successful. We started with ninth graders Last year being an inaugural year for the small schools, and then from there we add a 9th grade class and keep the previous class. So right now we have 9th and 10th graders. Next year we add another 9th grade group going 9 through 11, and then we will be complete with the 9 through 12 after next year. Another unique aspect of this is phasing out the old system. Last year there was grades 11 through 12 that were the old Cody. This year, grades 10 through 12 with old Cody. Then this year it was just 11th and 12th graders. Next year it will only be 12th graders, and then that school phases out and you'll only have the 4 small schools. Now the other question that comes in is the population, and this is a controversial topic. Many times when we go for reform models, the question comes in, what do we do with students with special needs? What do we do? Are we looking at dealing with neighborhood population? Are we looking at an application school, a testing school? And then the question of capacity. How many students can we serve? What is a small school? And by answering some of those questions, I'll go into a very important component, and that's the concept of human resources. There are several components to the human resources to implement this program, this design, reform design. First is finding an intermediary that is effective. We use Institute for Student Achievement, which comes up with the concept of having autonomous principals for small schools within the school, also the college readiness, having an advisory class, which is a mentoring program, and distributive counseling, where the teachers take on the role of adopting these young people as their own, where they meet with them beyond just their core subject areas, but also to help mentor them, and it's embedded into the schedule. That requires special staffing, which of course goes into the biggest topic of getting the right educators. With the help of United Way and Skillment, we've been able to work with the local unions to be able to create unique contracts to assist in helping us select those teachers and creating special contracts to provide extended day programs and extended year programs. Because I'm going to tell you now, just small enough is not going to make a major difference. We had to change how we actually provided the methods of instruction, and that goes into concepts of inquiry-based instruction, that goes into the concept of going into extended hours, and also with block scheduling. My school in particular has 2-hour blocks and a rotating schedule, which is unique for most schools. The other thing that you have to look at are the programs that come in where we have to find those partnerships to help assist with the curriculum, finding out what classes are offered, and then the tools that are needed, technology being put in the classroom, but making it meaningful so that we can actually come up with innovative projects for students. That goes into the concept of how we grade the students. We look at project-based learning at the core, collaborative learning at the core, and also inquiry-based instruction. Now, I know there's going to be plenty of questions about what to do, how do we get around the contracts. I won't talk about that now. I'll wait for those questions to come because that'll probably take this whole time. But the next question is, how does it feel? The signals of success. Mike brought up the issue of attendance. This is not going to be overnight that we'll all of a sudden see every child all of a sudden reading at the 12th, at a college level, and every student achieving great feats overnight. One of the things I love about United Way and Skillman as partners is that they realistically wanted to change education forward. They want to make sure that there's quality education for every child in our community, in our city. And that means that we did not do an application program. We did not create a tested population. We directly looked at the population of the Cody Rouge area, created a system of education, and we provide that education to that community. Now, we do reach out to areas beyond, to students beyond that area, but there was not this situation of trying to find that different population. We wanted to take the normal child that would be at Cody and provide a better system of education and instruction. So with that being said, the immediate, generally speaking, what we would generally see as some immediate indicators of success is, first, a positive trend in attendance, positive trend in culture. And when we say culture, that goes into behavioral issues. What we have seen, and then also being on track towards graduation. Those are the first indicators. What we found in that first year, as Mike has already discussed, is that with attendance, we had a huge change and shift in attendance during that 9th grade year. And it's even, I'm almost guaranteeing you that there's going to be even a greater increase this year. What we found with the small school design is that the young people are in school. I have numbers on the average daily rate. Students that come to school on a daily average range well over 80%, close to 90% with most of the schools. And that's coming to school every day. Now, we do have those young people that have the chronic absenteeism, but what we've been able to do with the small school design, with the advisory classes and with distributed counseling, is be able to reach out and contact those young people and get them in on a regular basis. So we're really hitting the issue of truancy. By getting them into school, now we have them on track towards graduating, because now they're in school. Rather than getting an F in class, we're able to find out what their deficiencies are, provide them the assistance in those areas, and they're able to pass those classes and not be forced to have to repeat classes or fall behind and become a 5-6-year student before they can graduate or possibly drop out. And then there's the issue of culture. One of the main reasons, and this is one of those big elephants in the room, that young people are absent is because they get suspended. Suspensions, if a child gets suspended 3 times in a year and each suspension is 5 days, that's 15 days of school they've missed already. As Mike has already brought up, the 20-day absence issue model is what we look at. We don't want any of our children to miss 20 days or more. If we suspend them 3 times for 5 days, we've already took 15 days just from us making them not come. We've come up with innovative methods to keep young people in school without having to suspend them, and that comes from the advisory program and concepts like in-school suspension versus suspending them and having them sit out at home. Now, for time's sake, I'm going to close out with next steps, and then we'll go to questions. The goal is 80%, 80%, 80%. All the time, what I'm looking at as the cutoff is I need 80% or more in all of the key categories in terms of students passing their classes, number of percentage of classes they go to. We're looking at trying to make sure at all time retention. We don't want to lose these young people. We want to know where they are all the way through graduation. And then the question that comes in next for a next step is, how far do we reach into the community? We have made huge gains into solving the issues that are inside the complex of Cody. The next phase is to look at how Cody relates to the Cody Rouge population. When we look at student safety, what we found is we can, and this comes from the city of Detroit really finding this out along with us, is that we have heard many of the issues of student behavior issues within the school and even outside on the campus. But what the next step is to make sure that the community that they live in is safe. And that's something that we found is a broader concept that goes beyond just our individual schools. It goes into any surrounding schools in our areas where there needs to be a concept of networks. We have to communicate with everyone in that community, every business, every other educational institution, everyone that's part of that community on making sure that there's safe routes to and from school and that there's a culture of excellence in that community. And then the last thing is that we got to make sure this is transferable, and that simply means, can we replicate it? As Mike has brought up, we're now looking at creating a new network of schools, and we have to be able to take these findings and these methods and be able to, provide them to others so that this can go on throughout the rest of the city of Detroit, and not the city of Detroit, as we have with this webinar. We want to make sure that these practices can be transferred to anyone else throughout the nation to be able to put in these practices. So I'll close there. I know there's plenty of questions. Talk fast. Ready to hear some questions.
Yeah, and I just want to conclude with, we just added our second network of schools so that 7 more of the original 30 schools joined the Turnaround Challenge last week, and we now have 17 schools serving 11,000 students in southeastern Michigan, all on the turnaround plan for 80% plus graduation rates.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Thank you both very much for a really engaging set of ideas and successes and experiences. Maybe we can open it up with a question from Eric Schwartz, and I'll supplement that a little bit. Eric asked, besides having a smaller school, what specifically do you do differently? Advisories and calls home is one thing. Do you offer different classes that are more engaging, apprenticeships or internships, externships? And then, so I just wanted to build on that question, say, you know, kind of looking at this dramatic decrease in absenteeism from 08 to 09 that happened in some of these schools. What exactly do you attribute to, you know, what are the concrete measures that you guys took that you think led to that basically 20% decrease in absenteeism? What is it about the small schools or what you do in the small schools or the ways in which you reach out to the community, et cetera, that explains that big drop and that huge success?
Yeah, and I think the question brought in a lot of those strategies when we talked about internships. And the biggest difference in the strategies, when we talk about an advisory class alone without actual capacity building in terms of taking the child into real-world experience. What we've done, the advisory class is set up to bring the child and make all of the educational principles that they learn through the day, we bring them into the real world. So we work with United Way and Skillman to find opportunities to provide the students some levels of enrichment. One thing that every small school does is make sure that we have college tours, regular college tours, at least once a month in many cases, to have the student have a regular visual of what it means, what the ultimate goal is. We also have partnerships with many of the local businesses, and once again, United Way and Skillman assist us with that and provide internships, job shadowing opportunities, career speakers. And with the advisory class existing in that 9th grade year, it gives us the setting to be able to set that up. Now, with the Michigan curriculum, many of the classes, and that's probably throughout the nation, they're pretty much locked in. When you look at a 9th grade curriculum, they're going to have to take their English, Math, Science, Social Studies, and then there's 2 electives left. One of those electives will be the advisory class, and then I just explained how that advisory will operate, where it becomes into a career in college readiness that's authentic. The key word is authentic, where they actually go into those actual businesses or to those universities. But then there's that 6th class, and in many cases, that's where, if you have a theme to your school, that's where you take that opportunity, that 9th grade year. You got to make it relevant. For my school, Academy of Public Leadership, they took ROTC. And the ROTC program wasn't to get them into a military program. It was to get them into understanding their role in their community, because there's a service component. And what you have to look at when you create that curriculum, it has to be linked to an overall vision. The students must know that vision, and they must see it in the day-to-day experiences they have in the classroom. That combined with inquiry-based instruction, that combined with collaborative learning, that combined with a block schedule, also using cohort groups, help create a bonding culture which brings that child into a consistent, I'll put it this way, with urban education, many of the young people don't have stable households or families or really communities. What we create is a sense of family that's stable, that provides them resources and experiences that they don't get at home, and that makes them want to come to school every day. That makes them hate not coming to school, hate not being in school. So that really is, in a nutshell, how it looks, and maybe Mike can
I just wanted to underline that. It's as simple as great principals with spectacular teachers, and every teacher knowing which 20 kids are his or hers, because I'm asking the kids the same question all the time, and they always tell me, oh, because Miss Ray would never let me not come to school, because I love Mr. Jackson. I mean, there's just true, deep, and abiding love and high expectations in the classrooms of these schools, and it is almost that simple.
That's great. So here's another question, and this one is from Lisa Pryor, and her question is, how much additional time did you add? What did you do with the additional time? And was it for all students or only specific targeted groups of students? And obviously, if it was targeted, how did you do that targeting?
With the time factor, you'll be amazed when you look at, each state has a certain amount allotted time that's required for the educational instruction. Then you have a union that also says, well, staff gets paid for a certain amount of time. So you have to look at that time and make it an effective use of the quality time. That's where when you look at your block schedule, you look at schedules, you know, for instance, my block schedule is as simple as looking at, okay, they need this many hours per week. Why does it have to be 1 hour per day? What if it was 2 hours, you know, what if I did double hours, you know, twice a week and 1 hour, you know, 1 day a week? You know, you look at it, and then what it does is create continuity of instruction. That's what a lot of people miss, is that through the course of a classroom period, if you have a 55-minute period, a child comes in 20 minutes late, they pretty much are only going to get 15 to 20 minutes of instruction, because basically there's a period of closeout that takes away 10 minutes at the end. If the hour is 2 hours long and the child comes in late, they still have a full hour and a half, you know, of instruction. It's looking at where we have gaps. It also looks at what causes attention span to fall off. We know the number of hall passings are when students get distracted. We know hall passes are when behavioral issues come in. If the hall passes are limited, that makes a huge difference. So it's not just necessarily embedded changes in terms of the time. It's looking at how to use that time more efficiently. Now, then there's the concept of extended day. When you start looking at tutoring after school, you need to make that an enrichment opportunity. It doesn't merely mean just tutoring. It means that the child is excelling in English, you create a journalism program. You create a debate team. You create programs, and then you have teachers, and that's where Mike brings it up. You've got to have those quality teachers, because you got to have someone to actually implement this. You have to have strong partners to be able to assist with the programs as well. So what we basically did was take the normal state standards and district standards, so I didn't have to, you know, I'm not having teachers get paid for hours, you know, that would be a bit much. If they had to work extra hours and weren't getting paid for it, I mean, that's a bit much to ask. But what I did was look at the time slot, reorganize it so it meets all those standards, and then for the extended day, looked at it from a different perspective. It doesn't have to be merely tutoring. Let's look at our partners, what programs we can bring in, what skills or specialties do our teachers have that they can, you know, take advantage of, and create new programs for that extended day learning.
Oh, that's great. So I thought it was really interesting that among the things that you emphasized for the absenteeism was the cultural and the community part of it and the family part. And you said that, you know, it's important for these kids at school to really feel like they have a sense of family even at the school. So what if I'm one of your teachers and, you know, I say, Mr. Matthews, I'm a good teacher, but I'm about the academics, and I'm about performance, and I'm about instruction, and I'm not trained, and it's not really my job to do the family and the love thing.
Then you can't work at our school. If you want to know a simple answer, the way, and this is where, you know, really the big debate that's there is, what is the role of the teacher in an urban setting? It's beyond just academic instruction. We've made that commitment. That's what distributed counseling is. That's one of the principles of Institute of Student Achievement, and we make that plain in the beginning. You cannot work at a small school and not have a personal relationship with those young people. There's no way to do it. You wouldn't enjoy the job. You would ask me to get rid of you after a while, because the culture is touchy-feely. They all have our cell phone numbers. They're going to text us and ask us if we need help, we need this, my power got cut off, you know, do you have someone I can call? That's what we find out. And I'll give you this. The model is, you know, one of the things that we found, and I think that really attracted me to the reform model as a whole, was the relationship I saw that, you know, inner city kids have with their coaches, and the lack of relationship they had with their teachers. And the reason why they had that relationship with their coach was that the coach went that extra mile with them. The teacher was busy just saying, take it or leave it. We are shifting the paradigm. That is the biggest shift. When we talk about good, bad teachers, I'm a former teacher, so I don't really go that route with that. I know there's teachers with one philosophy, teachers with another. The academic teacher, okay, that's your philosophy. You go to a school that believes that philosophy. If that's all you care about, and you don't care about the social needs of the young person, then this is not the place for you. What we need is academic excellence, a person that can differentiate that instruction, and the teacher that will go the extra mile to make sure they meet all of the needs of the young person, all of the social needs.
Yeah, I just want to add, so the principal has to have that autonomy to have that conversation with the teacher, because for Jonathan's first few years as a principal, teachers were just sent, and he couldn't send them back, and you just had no consistency of culture or expectations at that point.
So recently, there's been some work out that's looked at the average age of teachers, and it's shrinking dramatically. You know, so you have a lot fewer in a lot of these systems. Really senior teachers who've been in the business for decades, and a lot more young people. And the talk is that that's good and it's bad, because you get fresh perspectives, you get some energy that you might not otherwise have, but you don't get the experience, and the churn is high. So in the Cody High School complex, you know, what's the profile of the teacher? Are they somebody, you know, just coming out, Teach for America, or have they been there for a long time in the Detroit system for a couple decades even? What's the mix? What are we talking about?
You know, what I'll say with that, Mike has been battling for us. I will say this, United Way, Skillman, what they do there, they're really fighting for us to change how the union works with this model, because Detroit is a union city, and we still have a union, and young teachers are really unheard of in Detroit because of the amount of layoffs we've had. What we've had to do was look at we've had to look at what the landscape is currently from a human resource perspective, and find a way to extract those strong teachers that are still eligible to be hired. So, for instance, I don't have a teacher that has less than 7 years because of layoffs. But what I did was find those teachers that basically have already been innovative and came up and had that philosophy that matches the school's vision, and pulled them in. Now, I do anticipate, and I'm praying that there will be a day that we can reach out and start getting some of those younger teachers, because, you know, the fear of losing the experience, and that's always been an argument, the experience, because that was your original question, the experience versus the new teacher argument. I believe that's true. The experienced teacher, there's not a knock on a teacher that's been teaching for a while, as long as they meet the vision of the school. They need to know, like I said, this is beyond just simply take it or leave it education here. So we're looking at the experienced teacher and the new teacher as being, it needs to be a mix. But ultimately, the school leader, and Mike brought this up about the importance of the school leader, when you have a culture that is embedded in the basic foundation of everything that goes on a day-to-day basis in that facility, and the students are part of that culture, man, I'll say this, you bring a teacher that's not part of that culture in there, they'll run out of that building for a transfer, because it's too much work and it's too difficult. The parents would demand it. So I don't believe there's a war between new and old teachers. I believe there has to be a culture of expectations, and that means that the new teacher comes in, now they know there's someone there to assist them in training. For the experienced teacher, there's an opportunity for them to truly take advantage of their expertise. And that's the best way to look at it. I don't think there's a war there.
No, I am glad that we fought for and helped Teach for America return to Detroit. They do have a foothold. There's about 100 young teachers here from Teach for America, and we do hope to grow that.
Still enough.
It's still enough.
Oh, that's great. So another question from the participants. So looking outside, the question is, looking outside the school building, whether it's the Cody High School complex or other experimental schools and in reform school efforts in Detroit, looking outside of the building to the parents and to the communities around them, what has been the response to these changes? You know, what have been some of the positive responses, some of the negative responses? Because, you know, anytime you try to shake up, obviously, somebody's school, there's going to be some uncertainty and some worry and some anxiety involved.
Okay, I'm going to go first on this, and then Mike is going to give you some funny stories probably. What I'll say is this. Initially, when you do change, And Detroit's a strong city. There's fear. And Detroit, when they get scared, they don't run. They get ready, you know. And so the first phase was establishing a level of trust and clarity of what you're trying to do. A good example with that is, you know, are you trying, you know, there's this word, getting a different type of child. And you got to be careful with that. People are proud. Everyone wants their young person to get a quality education. If you start telling, you know, well, everyone, but we don't want your child, you know, that's where there's issues, and that's their fear in a lot of cases. What we were able to do that I think disarmed everybody was that we still kept the community involved. When I was part of the initial phase of this when it started, and one of the things I did as principal was join the community council committee, where I met with the community on a regular basis to make sure that you know, instead of it being a town hall meeting here and there and then we're gone and everyone's angry and thinking something happened behind closed doors, it was regular meetings with the community. I was part of the community. And I think that helped with the arming of the situation. But then there's the situation that Mike went through as an outside entity that's trying to provide services. People think there's an ulterior motive, that this is a takeover, there's the conspiracy. And it wasn't until, I say this, all through the first year, they thought that they'll tell you, you're just being tricked, you're being used, you know. But by the end of the first year, when they saw the success and the parents started seeing, you know, the parents are key. If you do right by those kids and they see their child growing, the community comes behind you. And those naysayers are now, they can't say as much because they don't have the following, because we have the actual people in the community. So I'm going to let Mike tell you his story from there.
Well, there's a couple around there. But, yeah, so we had to battle that people thinking United Way is trying to privatize the schools and take them over and somehow get money for running the schools. There's another thing that happened, I would say, among central office staff that started to see great results. And all of a sudden, when you see success and you're not successful, you want to create a reason why. So they started saying things like, oh, that's too expensive or something like that. So they were impugning the progress for no real legitimate reasons. One thing happened recently I just think is kind of funny. You know, these are schools, not just Cody, but a lot of the schools that used to have 2 to 3 fights a day in them. Mm-hmm. And now they have 2 or 3 fights a year maybe. I mean, it's just completely different. So the kids themselves have gone from seeing themselves as who's the toughest to being countless ready. But the neighborhood's still tough. Mm-hmm. So the word in the neighborhood is, oh, well, that school is lame now, meaning they don't fight like they used to, right? So you even have, like, you know, it's just amazing how many kind of words and images are associated with the school. But at the end of the day, like Jonathan said, we now have a sophomore class in these schools larger than the freshman class. Mm-hmm. For decades, the sophomore class was less than half the size of the freshman class. You may have 600 freshmen, 200, 300 sophomores, or whatever it was. I mean, it was just a dramatic drop-off. Now you have parents across the city just trying to figure out how to get their kids into the school. So at the end of the day, the word is really positive, but it wasn't easy. Yeah,
and let me close with this. It's not easy initially, but one of the key signs of success is when the parents are your best voice. Yeah. What helped us this year, compared to the first year, was just, stressful. This year has been a lot better because what we found is our biggest advocates are our parents. And that makes it where it's easy to tell the stories, it's easy to share the successes. And then you're just dealing with the political battles, but you're not dealing with this war within the community.
Yeah. A lot of credit to Jonathan and his principals for that, because that's a lot of late evenings with parents making that work.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think it's a lesson. Hopefully, other folks will learn from you that the politics, getting the politics right in school reform is just critical. You can't just be a great educator, obviously, because pretty soon you find yourself with a lot of enemies, maybe out of a job.
Yeah.
So another question that might be helpful for folks out there is about the partnerships and the resources. And so Cody, with the help of the United Way, and it sounds like other efforts in Detroit, you guys have managed to attract a pretty impressive amount of both private dollars and nonprofit dollars from that don't come from taxpayers, out of the budget of the public budget of the school system. How do you guys do that, and what are some lessons you have for other people who are looking for that kind of partnership on the resource side?
So my boss, Mike Brennan, is really good about saying to me, Mike, you have to create really easy on-ramps for people to engage for the success of the kids. And so the on-ramp we created has kind of two angles to it. One is you've got to bring people into the school all the time so they can meet and hear from the principals, teachers, and kids themselves. And the story's just told. It's almost a magical moment every time we do that. And we usually do that about once a month for 10 to 15 people at a time. But then the other piece is you've got to have the right infrastructure for them to be able to engage when they raise their hand and say, I'm interested in helping. And for us, that infrastructure is twofold. One is we have what we call champions councils. So it's a group of people that meet at the same time every month. So if you say, hey, I live in this neighborhood or work near this school, we can tell you exactly when the meeting is, who's on it, and you can go hear from teachers and kids and look at on-track data to see who's on and off track and how can we help kids stay on track. But it has to be consistent, easy for people to get to, with a good group of egalitarian folks in there. So you want parents, community members, as well as civic leaders.
So can you describe that? Like, what does one of those meetings look like? It's every month. Like, how many people are there? When does it happen? What's the ask?
Yeah, I can answer that. In fact, I got one tomorrow. So it's one, we call them action meetings. That was the first thing. I believe when you bring partners in, they're doing their job during the day, so you don't want to have a meeting where it's just rhetoric and talk and there's not action. They're looking to actually, they're committing themselves to make a difference. So you have to have a plan of action in place to get these things done. So when we have the meeting, generally speaking, we break down 5 key areas with our meeting. We started off by getting the stakeholders at the table, and we came up with 5 key areas that were most important. We created it based upon the conversations between us, and for Cody, it may be different for Osborne. But what happens is everyone says, this is what we see as the biggest need. Then from there, we go around the table and say, what resources do we have to be able to address each one of those needs? And then the next meetings go into action items based on that. So if we look at student safety as an issue, we will then say, well, what specifically are we talking about with student safety? Are we talking about inside the building, outside the school? It was mainly outside the school. Well, what is it? Safe passage to the busways. Well, it might have a member from the mayor's office that's there, and he'll say, well, I can make sure we have a police officer that's at that bus stop. It's like, well, the community will say, well, we can set up a neighborhood patrol. And then from the school level, I'll say, well, in return, I'll make sure I got 2 teachers that can drive around, and I can put my public safety in certain areas. Now we got safe pathways. And we can do that within a 1.5-hour meeting because everybody that has the power to make real change is at the table. Right. But the key to those meetings is make the action. There should be an action on every meeting. We meet once a month. So, and then we start off with basically a report out on how successful the last action item was, and then the next half of the meeting is next movement. If we sit there and just talk or complain or say somebody should, it's never the question of somebody should do this. The people that are going to do it are at that table. That's why it's called champions. These are the champions of that community. So this is action. And that's the key. You don't want individuals that come in that are not about really making the change and being the people to put the legwork to get it done.
And I just want to add to my United Way peers on the phone, we actually reallocated the way our staff is so that at least one person spends 25 to 50% of his or her time in or on the school's work. So they're really doing the relationship stewarding. So the principal doesn't have to spend all of his time on that.
That's key. I don't have to organize that. For those out there that are administrators, United Way, I can't even, they coordinate a lot of these resources because this is time that it takes. As a principal, I have a basic rule. I tell any administrator, 80% of your time at minimum must be with your young people. Right. Only 20% for adults. So with that being said, United Way is such a great assistance because they coordinate a lot of these programs and can set up these meetings. I show up with the action. And that makes it where this is not another set of, it doesn't add to your paperwork on your desk. This is actually taking some of the paperwork off your desk and actually putting things in action.
That's fantastic. So maybe briefly, Michael or Jonathan, maybe Michael, I'm interested a little bit in how you sustain the engagement. So are there examples in which it's been hard to get a championship council started, or in which, you know, it was going pretty well, but then people stopped showing up, and how do you deal with that? What are the strategies for getting things re-energized or energized when people aren't going?
It's a good question. We just started these this year. They began in November, and every last one of them is having momentum now. And I give a lot of that credit to our United Way folks, who are just really good at relationship and making these meetings meaningful. And then, as Jonathan said, at the meeting, you've got to hear from the principal and the people, and there's got to be action associated. But because, again, it's all about these easy on-ramps. Just lift up a couple examples. A judge came to one. She now teaches character development for girls every other Friday for like 2 hours after school. A journalist wrote a story on the school. She now teaches writing to the kids every other Thursday at the school. So it's just, and the president of Children's Hospital came. In that meeting, he dedicated a partnership to the school, and just yesterday brought his entire staff out for, this is for medicine and community health. But people want to help. I just don't think they've had the on-ramps to do it, and they haven't had the trusted leadership in place who's able to coordinate with them in a way that's respectful to the time of both parties. It's been a little bit chaotic trying to enter the schools historically.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback. I keep saying action on these meetings. The reason why you look forward to going to the meeting is because you would have everyone's kind of excited about, because something happened between the last meeting, and you want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And then you also have a plan of action as a result, because everything kind of piggybacks off it. If it's just talk every meeting, then that's where you see that eventually you're like, I don't need to go there. There's nothing that's coming out of it. So I think that's what keeps the momentum, and the momentum, because there's so many needs out there that, you know, at the end of the day, as long as we keep, you know, addressing them, there's going to be momentum. What I found is that it actually increases membership. There's people that want to come to the meeting because they'll see the event or something that comes out of the meeting, and they're like, well, how did this happen? It's like, well, I want to be part of it. And that's kind of how it goes versus, you know, I think where meetings, everyone hates going to meetings when there's nothing that's going to come out. That's the worst meeting, you know. So I think that's the key. That's simply the key.
That's fantastic. So we're almost at the end of our allocated time, but maybe if both Michael and Jonathan, if you had, you know, take a minute or two each for kind of closing thoughts and messages that you'd like to get to your colleagues, either, you know, in the civic world or in the education world.
Yeah, our big thing at the United Way in Detroit was fighting this thing that you just got to close the schools and start charters. We just haven't seen that type of success in charters. And so what we've really been working on for 3 years is how to craft a third way where a nonprofit co-owns the success of the school with the local leadership of the school. And we've just seen really amazing things happen when our board of directors at United Way feels as responsible for the kids at Cody as John does and his peers. But it's really difficult. I mean, we had to completely change our funding process. We don't fund nonprofits anymore. We'll put the money in the school for them to fund nonprofits. That's different. Our volunteers are used to making decisions from a downtown office. Those are being made by Champions Councils at a local school. So there's been a huge amount of change, but if you really want different results, you've just got to embrace that change.
Yeah, and I'm going to really piggyback off that. It's work and it's time. I used to be assistant principal of a school that had 2,200 kids, and now I'm principal of a school that has 220. And people always say, you know, oh, you got it easy. This is 1,000 times harder. I mean, if I wanted it easy, I would go to a regular comprehensive high school with 2,200 kids. And then, honestly, I don't know half of them. I don't have to deal with a quarter of them. I mean, I only have to deal with maybe a quarter of them one day. You know, what this is, I literally know every child. I have every cell phone. I have every one of their cell phone numbers. I know everyone in that community. I have to find every resource for that child, and I have to make sure every teacher's needs are met, because the teacher's finding out stuff. Before, we didn't know half of the stuff. It was out of sight, out of mind. So for anybody that's going into this, do not think it's easy. Small means that you're going to put a lot of energy into that small set.
Small means mighty.
Small means mighty. If small intents, you're like a laser. You're strong and you're power focused. So with Mike as a partner, we've been able to get a lot done. You got to have that partner that has the same amount of energy to get this done for it to be successful.
Well, that's fantastic. I think the small is mighty is a great point to end on, as is the third way. I mean, I think everybody listening and engaging in this webinar has got to be just extremely impressed with how creative and bold you guys have been, not just in doing the work, but having the imagination to say, you know, look, we're not going to do charters or vouchers or, you know, whatever the next kind of fad in school reform is. We're going to kind of go our own way and try to make it work with this particular strategy that's school-centered and focused around civic and educational partnerships. So thank you very, very much for sharing your experiences, and I learned a huge amount, as I'm sure everybody else on the call did.
It's a privilege to share it with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's been a privilege. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, take care.
Okay.
Take care.